If I can just change the way I look at it, it solves the problem. Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's just looked at differently. And I have found that a lot of people who succeed where I don't often see things a way that I don't. Yeah. And that's, and it's like, it's not some big magic trick. It's just, you need to look at it differently, but you don't know how. And that's part of the challenge, right? So by us discussing and investigating this stuff, I often find that one of the reasons I find so much value in this podcast conversation with you is just that I walk away and I look at something differently than I did when I started. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge benefit for me. So if I can do that every week, and theoretically, if I could look at one thing differently every week or at least every month, I mean, hey, that's a big win. I'm changing, I'm evolving, I'm opening up doors that weren't open to me before. This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art. Okay, boom, jumping into it. Part 2 of our last conversation. Part 2 of 2. From our State of the Podcast address, where we've been exploring from our last episode into this one, revisiting, exploring, what is this podcast really all about? What are the big things for us about this? Have any of those things changed? And just trying to seeing where it's at, and it's led us down some interesting roads. And at last we were exploring some different ideas around unknown and versus the known and things like that, and these sort of, I guess, these things that are dualities, but at their heart they're connected. Like, dualities are always, there's a relationship with each other, and you were bringing in some metaphors around your newfound passion of motorcycling and picking your lane, and as well as you brought in that element of one of our part of our tagline, claim your own path, and that's not necessarily just about you being like, who gives a shit about anyone else, and I'm just doing what I'm doing, but and I thought that's maybe an interesting thing to talk about as well, in terms of what that really means in terms of claiming your own path. So, and I also have a question that I want to bring in for both of us, maybe a little bit into this podcast. I don't want to quite drop it just now. So that's where we left things off, as to my memory. So where shall we kick things off, Brandon? Okay, well, let's just start with this claim your own path bit. So that's where I kind of left it. I think that initially, when we were talking about claim your own path, I do think like that's something that I've had to kind of work out myself. Like, what is that? What does that mean? And as time has progressed, and I've progressed and I've evolved with it, I've begun to realize it's not about, like, it's not a fight. It's not like, hey, like I need to like mark my territory and throw your elbows
up, right? Maybe there's a place and time for that. Maybe there's a appropriate moment where that's necessary, where it's like, this is my zone, and drawing boundaries and things like that. Maybe that is relevant. But I think what claim your own path means is that you're going down a path, and maybe someone else walked that path, but don't just do what they do. Mm-hmm. Assess your path and look at it in terms of, hey, this to me makes sense. And, sometimes you'll find a better way, and sometimes you'll realize that they were dodging an error that you walked into, and then you learn, right? So, but own the fact that you made that choice, that was your choice. And don't, I think also, like, something that's coming up for me with claim your own path is, don't blame the path you're walking on someone else. Like, I walk this path because my parents did this and my teachers were this way to me. Like I've done it. It's not going to help you, and it's not good. Claim your own path is like, look, I'm choosing this path because it makes sense to me. And maybe your parents did do whatever. And so that informed the choice that you're making. But at the end of the day, it was your choice that you made based on what you experienced, sure, but it's not their fault that you chose that path.
Yeah.
And I feel like the wise artist doesn't blame their path on anyone else. They claim it, they own it, they say, look, this is my mistake. I made it, I learned, I chose, and I will either choose differently or choose again. But, and the other thing too is, like, kind of bask in your mistakes as well, because they're your mistakes. You made them. They're your lessons.
Yeah.
You're the one walking it. And so, yeah, like maybe someone else didn't make that mistake. And if someone ever like looks down on you, like, don't let your ego get in the way about that. Like, it's just simply like, hey, that's how I had to learn. I had to stumble that way, whereas you didn't, but I did. And that's what was necessary for me. But, you'll have some benefit. You'll find, I found this. It's the last thing I'll say. Your mistakes are often the things that teach you the greatest lessons.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't go through life trying to never make a mistake. You should look at life as like, I will try not to make mistakes, but when I do, I will look at it as a gift and an opportunity to learn. And that's part of claiming your own path. So
yeah. I think that pain, where there's been sources of pain in your life, if you look, you can find that there's an extraordinary well of passion that's there with it. And I know that even in my own life, without getting into too much details about it, but I experienced a pretty deep and traumatizing spiritual wound, which a lot of people have, when sort of, if you were brought up in a kind of religion, you were taught certain things, and I experienced a very deep one there. And in retrospect, as much as I still wrestle with this thing at times, there's a part of me that really enjoys that wrestling now. And it's also led me down into, like, it sent me down into a place of really enriching knowledge and exploration and things that wouldn't have happened hadn't that pain occurred, right? So there's something about where, at a certain point, it's not prudent. It doesn't serve you to continue blaming someone. And this isn't to say that you weren't the victim of something and that there wasn't much you could do about it, because even in my own circumstance, where I was and how old I was and all of these things, they're really, like, I wasn't in a place where that there was much I could do. It was sort of something that was put upon me, and it wasn't until later on that I could actually, address these things. And there can be a lot of emotion that comes with those things, but I have found a tremendous amount of passion when it comes to these subjects now, and a passion that's super enriching, and brings me into conversations and dialogues with people that there's so much love and joy in it that it's so much of what my life has become about, and in a positive sense. So just touching on that aspect of what you were saying, but also something that occurred to me is this thing of claim your own path. There might be some element where it seems like, rah rah rah, claim it.
Yeah.
And there's something that I think our egos can easily grab onto and attach to with that whole thing, and that's really not, I don't think, what we're talking. It's definitely not what I'm talking about with this. And so a different, maybe a little flip on that expression that I might throw out there is, it's about having faith in your own path, trust in your own path, trust in this thing that is calling you, which is another thing that we talk about a lot. And like, What's your calling? What are you being called to? Right? And saying like, trust in that thing. Go towards that thing. Don't make apologies for that thing. Don't make yourself, don't minimize what that is in your life. And that in a way is claiming it. It's taking ownership, but it's about really doing that thing, really going for it. Right. And that's, to me, is maybe that flip of have trust in your own path. And even though it's full of unknown things, and your way of doing it and approaching this thing is going to be completely different than the way someone else might do it, right? But that's okay, and so I think in so many regards this is about, okay, so how do we trust that thing? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face. It's just like, okay, as we were talking about in the last episode, there can be a lot of fear and discomfort and things like, and it can mean letting go of a lot of comforts and safeties and things that you might have currently. But how do you take that path and have some trust and faith in that thing? And, I think that for me personally, I always want, as best as I can, to express a lot of these ways in which we enter into that unknown and step into that unknown path, and try to bring an element of, why is this actually a smart thing to do? Why is this actually a very practical, smart, intelligent thing to do? Because we often think of that as being like wild and reckless and stupid. But like, why is there actually something very actually really intelligent and smart about doing this, as opposed to making the quote unquote safe choice?
When we started this kind of rebrand of, Way of the Artist, we did our first 3 episodes were find your path, embrace your path, and claim your path. I was thinking about that. I was like, I think we're often under the assumption that if we're not headed towards where we think we're supposed to go, that somehow we're not on track. And other people will have judgments of that, and they'll say like, what are you doing with your life and whatever. Like that's, there's something about that. And here's the thing, I think you got to go back to the initial idea, which is like, find your path. And you're going to look and you're going to go, okay, like, I'd like to walk through the front door. I'd like to just walk straight to it. And like, that's what you'd like to do. And you realize you go and do that and it doesn't work. And it's just not going to work, and it's not possible. And then you can get discouraged and you can be like, okay, well, I guess this isn't for me. And you could give up. That's where you got to find your path. That's where it's like, you gotta consider the fact that whatever you're trying to do in life, wherever you're trying to go, whatever you're trying to figure out, get good at, whatever it is, that it's not as simple sometimes as you might think in the beginning. And the initial stages of doing anything is simply finding a way there. And then you're going to find out that the way there is probably more indirect than you were initially hoping or planning on. And this is where I think embrace the path comes in. Embrace the fact that it's not going to be a straight line, that it's going to be off track seemingly at times, and it's going to be zigzag and around, and sometimes maybe even backwards. And you need to embrace the fact that, like, look, I'm like, if you're hiking a mountain and you're trying to climb straight up the mountain, like, you might as well be rock climbing, because there's certain parts where it's just, you're going to be on a cliff face. So there's cutbacks and zigzags and things like that. So if you're in a setback time in your life where you're off track in your life, why don't you just look at it as a cutback? Like, look at it as like a way to help you climb this mountain a little easier. And so that's embrace the path. Is like, well, I guess for me, this part of the journey is not direct, and just embrace the fact that that's okay. And then claim it is like, own the fact that this is the way that you chose to go. So when you go through pain and you go through turmoil and you go through difficult things, you're like, this is the choice I made. And so I made this choice and I got myself here to this pain and I am experiencing this pain, and you just own it. Because I feel like a lot of people, and I've done this myself, is we make a mistake or we go through some pain and we look at regrets and things and we go, oh, if only I didn't do that. If only I did it this way.
Yeah.
And we all know someone and we all know we've done it. We all do this bullshit. Claiming your path is just owning the fact that you chose the way you chose and just deal with it. Like, play it where it lays kind of thing, you know? Like, this is it. Just make it work. You know, it is what it is. It's your, you know, it's your choice. It's your way. And so finding it is sometimes realizing, I think finding it is realizing that, you know, and that's what this podcast is about. It's about helping you find it, embrace it, and claim it. So finding it is that, you know what? It's not as obvious as you thought on the onset. It's actually a little bit different. And it turns out that you need to look a little harder. You need to be a little more creative about even going down this path. And you need to find a solution to the problem that you're facing. Embracing it is, you know what? This isn't as fun as I thought it would be. This is actually painful. This hurts. I don't like this. This is uncomfortable. I don't know if I can do this. Embrace that shit. Be like, hey, I got to get better. I got to live up to it. I got to figure out how to deal with this shit. You know, and that's embracing it. And then claiming it is, I made mistakes along the way, and just fucking own that shit and be like, those were my mistakes. I made them. I fucking did that. And you know what? This is what I learned. And I learned it because I made that mistake. And it's not because somebody told me. It's not because some wise guru came along and said, hey, by the way, this is how life works. I fucking lived that life, and that's how I know that's how life works, at least in this area, because I fucking stumbled and I fell and I did it. And that was my stumble, my fall. And I'm the one that got the scrapes and the scars and the bruises to show for it. And you know what? You're going to find out if you just claim your path that you're a better person for claiming your path. You're more the kind of person that people want to talk to. And the thing is like, look at all the people we listen to, right? We listen to people who figured it out in spite of the pain and the discomfort and the mistakes. And they didn't give up and they kept going and they found a way. And we look to them as like, tell me how you did it. What did you do? And they all do some variation of this same thing. They found a way. They embraced whatever difficulty was involved with it and just dealt with it. And then when they fucked up, they said, that was my fuck up and I'm going to do better next time. And they kept moving forward. And they didn't let one of those things stop them. And I think that's a lot of what this podcast is about. It's the last thing I'll say. People give up because it wasn't as easy to find as they thought. So they don't even look. Secondly, they start finding it, it gets painful, and they give up because they don't like pain in their life. Thirdly, they make some mistakes along the way. They go the wrong way, and they don't claim it. And they don't allow that to be okay. That's just part of cutting through something. That's just part of trailblazing. It's just part of life. So just claim it. Just own it. Like I fucking spent the last 5 years, I'm not saying this happened for me, but I spent the last 5 years doing the wrong fucking thing, working for the wrong boss, doing the wrong job, wasting my fucking life. Instead of beating yourself up about that goal, that's what it took to wake me the fuck up to realize I got to stop doing this and I got to go the other way. And so that's claiming your path, in my opinion. I feel like, you know, we're not always talking like in that type of vigor, but that is part of what this show is about for us. You know, it really is. Make an effort to look, learn how to deal with the discomfort, and then own the shit as you work your way through it.
Yeah, it's and that's a kind of honesty, I suppose. You know, like a kind of honesty that you have to have with yourself about your life and what you're doing in it and what you're making it about, I suppose, right? Like, and so much of what you are making your life about and what's the focus of your life when you really look at what your day-to-day pursuit is and what the thing is it's like, is, you know, I think what is guiding that thing is a big question in that as well. right? Because again, it's like, I think that there can be an easy jump into something that's very egoic, right? In terms of because I've seen a lot of people who they use their sort of story and their struggle and their success and stuff like that, and they talk about these things, but they do it in a way that still it's still not really about something bigger than themselves. You know what I mean? It's still so self-indulgent, right? And I think that's why it's important to bring that thing back into that. It's the way of the artist is about something that's bigger than yourself, whatever that thing is, and that path, I think, needs to be influenced by that bigger thing. And I think your story about, or just what you alluded to of the person, I've been doing the wrong thing for 5 fucking years. It's like that can be very much, well, yeah, you were doing something that was in service to some ego, right? And there's this, there's always these balances. There's always these balances in this stuff where it's, the individual and the collective, right? The individual and the whole, right? And it's, again, these are not removed things, right? Like this, we're not talking about just like, you go and you get yours and that's, that's
Yeah.
that's what it's all about, know? And you own your shit and you fucking, it's like, there is wisdom to it, but it's like, where's the wisdom coming from? Right. And to me, it's like, I coming back to, well, it's about honesty, right? It's like, well, why are you going this way? What is compelling you to do this thing? What, like, and being really honest, because it's at least in my own life and experience, it can be very easy to fool ourselves. We fool ourselves of things all the time. And I think that the artist is always is always in that battle, in a way, is always in that, I mean, maybe battle is a very dramatic way of putting it, but the artist is always wrestling with that thing of the voice of falseness and the voice of truth, right? And how do you remove as much as possible? How do you remove the barriers and the falseness from expressing the real, honest thing that's there, that's in you, right? And how do you express that thing with that degree of truth? And that's in many ways part of that whole find, embrace, claim aspect as well.
Yeah, a lot of what these conversations are about reframing and altering our perception and understanding of stuff and looking at it differently. I feel like that's a big part of it. Something that we started doing in one of the classes I teach is we don't call it going to work anymore. We don't even call it working, whether you're working on your artist or whatever. We call it, I'm going to my earning. And we had this big conversation. This happened actually last week, and it was a really great conversation with the class. And people were like, yeah, this word's bullshit. It's like, I'm not going there to work. That's not why I'm going there. I'm going there to earn. So I'm calling it earning. This is my earning.
Yeah.
I'm not like, yeah, they want me to work. I'm doing, and like, and like, it's also not that work is necessarily a bad word. Work, it depends on your relationship to it. But a lot of people have a relationship to work as like, oh, I got to work. This is a pain in the ass. I don't want to do this. Whereas like, well, why are you working? Because you don't have to work. You could not go to your job. There's a whole lot of stuff you could do. And you're like, well, I can't do that. No, you could, but there's consequences. So why are you going? You're not just going because what? You're going to get in trouble? Like that's like the least of your worries. Your
Yeah.
real worry is that, hey, I'm not going to have enough money to live. I'm trying to, and if you have goals, man, earning is even more important. You know, you got to earn, you got to figure out how I'm going to get it. So like, you know, I think a big part of, as I navigate this podcast with you, is something that I've been trying to work through is just reframing how I look at stuff, reframing how I look at fear, reframing how I look at the unknown, how I look at being present, how I look at something that's sacred. You brought that word up before. You know, it's like just reframe it.
Yeah.
Just change your relationship to it and adjust it, because sometimes I've found that the only thing holding me back is just the way I look at it.
Yeah.
That's all.
For sure.
And if I can just change the way I look at it, it solves the problem.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's just looked at differently. And I have found that a lot of people who succeed where I don't often see things a way that I don't.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and it's like, it's not some big magic trick. It's just, you need to look at it differently, but you don't know how. And that's part of the challenge, right? So by us discussing and investigating this stuff, I often find that one of the reasons I find so much value in this podcast conversation with you is just that I walk away and I look at something differently than I did when I started. And that's a huge benefit for me. So if I can do that every week, and theoretically, if I could look at one thing differently every week or at least every month, I mean, hey, that's a big win. I'm changing, I'm evolving, I'm opening up doors that weren't open to me before, right? And maybe I'm even, you know, like when you talk about addiction, like my mom used to smoke. Now she can't even be in the same room as smoke. Like she's just shifted so much. And when I was a kid, I tried to, Mom, please quit. It's killing you. Like I just don't smoke. And nothing I could do. But at some point she had her whole relationship to smoke in general changed. And now she sees it differently than she ever saw it.
Yeah.
And at one time it was comfort, it was stress relief, it was whatever it was. But if you start seeing it as something else, something toxic, something bad, whatever, you will stop doing a bad action as well. Just like you'll start doing a good action that you've been avoiding because it brought up some uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a big part of why I think State of the Union, why we're doing this, reframe perception.
For sure. Yeah, no, reframing is, I think, a huge part of a lot of our conversations. I know that, you know, I find that like a big, and I'm not just saying this with like the podcast, but just in my own life and what I've observed is how many problems and issues are actually just a matter of linguistics. You know, like it's just like, oh, well, you know, the reason why you didn't connect with that or you're not able to relate to what I just said is because of the word that I just used, which is why I often, maybe to some people, painstakingly try to find different words or to redefine how I'm using a word and or even words that you're using. It's like let's try and develop a new understanding of this thing is, so that again we can relate to it differently. And you know, so much of, I mean, everything is relationship, right? Everything in our life is predicated on our relationship to it and to each other and to the world. It's all relationship, right? And so being able to, I think, being able to, and perspective is a big part of it, which is really what reframing is. It's, you know, being able to bring new perspective to our relationships to the world and to our place in the world that can essentially alleviate unnecessary sources of pain and suffering and help us to create healthier relationships with it is definitely a big part of it. So I wanted to, because I'm super strapped for time as of today, and
so we gotta call it a day.
We gotta call it, but I wanted to throw something out there. I wanted to throw something out there.
All right.
And I don't know if we'll see if we can cover it in a couple of minutes here, but. Now that we've reached the end of this conversation,
Is it your question?
This is my question.
Oh, okay.
And for both of us, and I'm thinking of sort of how the debate technique, or not technique, but it's a tool called the Steel Man, which isn't exactly what we're doing here. But I thought I'd ask you, it's like, so at the end of this conversation, what is it that how would we each try and define each other's understanding of what this podcast is? I thought that might be interesting. I'd be interested in knowing where you think the core of where I'm coming from is at, and where I think the core of where you're coming from is at.
Okay. I like it. That's a good way to finish this off. I'm just going to say one thing. So I did mention this beer on part 1, but it's from batch 44. It's Old Creeker's Cream Pale Ale, or how do you say it? I don't know.
Creeker's Cream Ale.
Cream Ale. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a cream ale, not a pale ale. Cream ale. Anyway, delicious, smooth. So look, I would say for you, what I get from what you bring to these conversations so often, and has helped me a lot, is you tend to look at how do we get present in the moment and see things as they are right now, and not get too lost in the past or get too lost in the future. You have a certain amount of like being level-headed around, you know, not getting too emotionalized or too charged up about anything that you haven't really looked into. I'm the opposite. I tend to get like, I tend to be like, yeah, let's go to war. You know, like I'm like, and I need to like calm down a little bit. So I found that you're very good at, you know, kind of like giving me a bit of a level head. Sometimes I feel you're a little bit too, you're always looking for the light. You're always looking for the bright, good. You're very idealist in certain ways and optimistic in certain ways, which I do like and appreciate, and many times it's served me. Sometimes I'm like, no, fucking Evan, you're just like, you're trying too hard to find the good, man. Like, bring it back a little bit. Like, come down to earth. Not to say that that's always right, but I do find that it is a nice quality to have. I think it's a very positive quality to have, although sometimes I do feel a little bit unrealistic and and a little bit I feel like there's a certain tendency for you to want to, and like, I don't know why you do this necessarily, but I feel like you try to avoid the darker thing when I'd like to investigate a little bit more. And I think that's okay. I think that's a good quality. I think it's actually a much better survival quality to have, to be like, let's not fucking get dragged into the ditch here. But I do think sometimes there's a time to like, let's get our hands in the mud. Let's dig into this a little bit. It's a little uglier than we like. Yeah, so I find that. And then I would say like one other thing. I would say that you're very good at taking the position of, I don't know, let me explore. And I think that's probably the best asset that you've brought to this podcast for me, because I tend to come in a little bit too much like I know, and it's my ego. I'll admit it. I have definitely an ego that fucking takes the wheel sometimes, and I have to keep it in control, and I'm sure others can relate, but I'm a little bit like, no, let's just like, we know this. It's like, maybe you don't. And so I do appreciate that, because sometimes I'm like, you do make me take a moment, take a breath, and go, wait a minute, maybe I don't know this as well as I think, and I learn more because of that. So I'd say you're very good at that, and that I'm sure helps other people learn and not assume they know as much as they think they do. And it definitely exposes my ego, which sometimes humbles me, which I think is good, you know, because I do need a little humble pie every now and then. I can admit that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that, you know, for you, and just in terms of where I see the messages that you bring to and continually come back to and relay to me and to the audience and everyone is, you know, I think that the sort of the exploration of that, of going back to that, find your own path, embrace your path, claim your path, is very much like in line with a lot of where you're at with this, and you know, you're always bringing this element of, look, what's your real honest to God vision of what you want to do in your life, you know, and once you know what that thing is, just fuck what anyone thinks about it. Fuck what anyone says or thinks about it. It's not your concern. And go and do it. And don't make excuses for it. You know, it's like that. There's that school of no bullshit that comes from Brandon. Which, you know, I think as you were saying, like sometimes it's like I think that it can dip into that ego side of things. But you know, that's where you know I try and just reflect that back every now and then, and just be like. But here's my thing: is that even when I see that, it's like I acknowledge, I see the like I'm able to sort of sift through that and be like, all right, here's the stuff that I know is not actually what you mean or how this might be coming across, and here's the thing that you're actually really saying it. Here's the pure, or at least here's what I think is the pure expression of what you're saying. But you know, and yeah, vision is such a big thing for you in this one as well, and these are all so important to the artist, and I think that, you know, that's where we have a lot of similarities that we have, which is why, you know, we've been doing this for as long as we have, and I think some of the differences that we have are they balance each other out a little bit.
I think that's why it works to some degree. We have enough similarity and enough difference where we can find. I mean, it's amazing that we can even talk about half the shit we talk about and understand each other. I mean, and figure that out because, you know. But let me ask you this: I know you got to go, but this is the last thing I want to kind of spin it back. How do you think of my assessment? And I'll like what how did that land for you, and is there anything that you agree with, disagree with? Is there anything that kind of stood out that you maybe went, yeah, you know, that's true, I see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I will say that it wasn't what I was expecting in terms of what I thought that the question was asking, but it was not untrue. I think that you're definitely spot on about a few things in terms of, yeah, like looking for the light. That's usually what I'm trying to do, and I think it can definitely be an aspect of my own just like not wanting to go there. Like I just don't want to head into that thing. And I think that that's just because I'm so aware of that dark part. You know, it's like, and it's sort of my counterbalance is just like, we got to keep on looking for the light, because otherwise the you know, there's been many great quotes on the darkness, you know, where it's just, you know, you stare too long to the darkness, eventually the darkness stares back at you.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. And that is true.
And also, from one of my favorite shows, and I've said it many times before, but from Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you look for the light, you'll often find it. If you look for the darkness, it's all you'll ever see. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm coming from in that thing, and also it's just like the light just sort of shines on it. I know that there's probably some naivety that's going on in there too, but I thought that your assessment was not what I expected, but I feel like it was pretty accurate. Yeah.
Well, you know, I'd say, I mean, yours is pretty accurate too. I would say that, you know, I have an approach to life which is very much about, like, there are times in life where your feelings don't matter. And I feel like in our culture today, that's more important than ever. And as an artist, it's a difficult thing to navigate because your feelings are going to be such an important element to your process. And it's like, well, Brandon, when do I listen to my feelings and when do I ignore them? And so, like, that's a tough question. I don't have an answer for you. I don't have an answer for you, but I can tell you that there's a certain approach that I've learned in life, which I do impart on this podcast. And sometimes I do think you're right. It comes across, even to you, as a little bit callous, a little bit harsh, and a little bit uncaring, and a little bit like bold for me to say what I say. But here's the thing. I'm very much a champion of people, and I say, look, let's sort out the feelings later. We'll pick it up later. We'll see how we feel. But just do the fucking thing now. Just do it now, and don't worry about how you feel. We'll figure that out later. We'll sort out our feelings later. Because if you listen to your feelings too much, it will stop you from ever taking action and ever doing what you want in your life. So if I am going to close off today, this is the last thing I would say, is I hope that you can, if you're a listener and you're still listening to me talk at any point, that you can understand the intent. Even if you don't like what I'm saying, and even if you don't like me, and even if you don't like my tone or my approach, that my intent is really good, is that I want you to be unapologetic about your dreams and your vision, and I want you to go for it, and I want to be a champion to encourage you to do it. And it's not that I don't care about your feelings, and also I understand that I might hurt your feelings when I say some of the shit I say, but let's clean that up later. Let's sort it out later, and let's just get you doing the life you want to live. And that's a big part of why this podcast is important to me. But go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thing just that you sparked there is, in so many ways, it's about understanding what's actually important. What's the shit that is actually important and really actually matters? And then, okay, so what are the feelings? Is this feeling important to that thing right now? And what is the feeling that is important to that thing? Is how do you navigate all those feelings? Like, is this feeling important to the thing that is important? Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.